Good morning, everyone. My name is Michal Karpíšek. I'm Secretary General of EURASHE, and I will guide you through today's webinar on smart specialization, and especially the experience focusing on the Portuguese case, the experience of Portuguese polytechnics in being engaged in smart specialization, supporting the regional development in their respective regions. And we will have a number of respected speakers. I would like to say as well, thanks to the informal group of Friends of Smart Specialization, the senior experts in the topic who have created the group to sort of move and comment the agenda of smart specialization at a European level. And we are very grateful that we could have made this partnership and rely on their experience. Dimitri Korpakis, one of Friends of Smart Specialization, will provide the wrap-up at the end of the webinar. We have Alexandra Almeida, the coordinator of the National Strategy for Smart Specialization from the National Innovation Agency in Portugal, who will take the floor shortly after my introduction. Then we have three colleagues from the Portuguese polytechnics who will share their experience. Filipe Chaves, the dean from the School for Professional Higher Education of Polytechnic Institute of Cavado and Ave, Ms. Ana Sargento, Vice President of the Polytechnic Institute of Leira, and Luis Loures, Vice President of Polytechnic Institute of Porto Alegre. And then after their presentations, there will be the panel discussion with a few of us, but also engaging you in questions, answers, and comments. I guess that through the past several months, all of us have got used to the webinars, got used to the rules. So we will see on the screen the presentations and the faces of the speakers. The participants are more than warmly welcome to provide comments in the chat and raise their questions in questions and answers. So please don't wait, ask for whatever might come into your mind, what would you like to know from the speakers, but also share your experience and comments in the chat. And I can see that there were already starting things, so thank you for that. I will try to do my best to follow that and raise the questions and get the comments from the chat. That's basically it. So I will say a few starting words about EURASHE. Just finding the presentation, which is not there. That's always a surprise. I will keep talking till I open the presentation. Sorry, EURASHE is the European representation of professional higher education, the universities of applied sciences, polytechnics, various colleges, but also universities with a distinct profile and interest in professionally oriented education and applied sciences, especially from the systems which are not binary divided. I'm not sure why I can't see my screen, but there's always something to learn. Why is this? Sorry for that. This is something unusual, and we are learning every time. Philip, can I ask you if you would be so kind to share my presentation, because I can't get it on the screen. Okay, thanks. Can you make it full screen? Perfect. Okay, Yeah. I will say just a few words about who we are, why we are interested in regional engagement. Next one, please. Yeah. Well, that's a EURASHE community. We focus on professional higher education, which we understand as higher education, which is characterized by strong links with the world of work in all its aspects. Well, you can read the definition. I'm not going to go through that. We represent, next one, please. We represent about 67 members, including national associations across Europe, which covers about 640 higher education institutions. So that's quite a volume. Next, please. This is the framework of which we have decided or chosen for the ongoing years, focusing on the mission and the position of professional higher in the changing world in educational systems, addressing various aspects, but then focusing on flexible and relevant learning for the coming skills, engaging into regional development activities, and focusing and promoting the user-oriented research. Thanks, Fede. Next one. One of our decisions was to, well, we see the regional engagement as really growing agenda and more important agenda. And therefore we have also applied for the project which would allow us to map the regional engagement of universities of applied sciences with the support of European Union Erasmus program. We can now have a more thorough mapping within the project, which is called UASIMAP. Can we go further? It brings together the national rectors conferences from 5 countries, including Portugal. And the purpose is to map the scope of regional engagement activities, try to understand what would be the tools to measure the impact and the success, because we still find that the number of used indicators are not necessarily relevant. And I will come to some further conclusions within the project. What we have discovered, and I think there's no surprise, what is the wide range of regional engagement activities of universities of applied sciences. It goes from engagement in regional strategy formulation, and I think we will hear some of the cases when we hear from the colleagues from Portuguese polytechnics, through reflecting the regional needs in curricula, in learning and delivery of learning experience. We can see that there's a growing volume of lifelong learning activities, but we also see that the universities of applied sciences are opening up to the region to share their capacity and support the development through their innovation activities. And we should not forget also the social innovation. Next, please. When it comes to the first findings, the project is running for almost 1 year. We can see that the regional dimension is part of the mission of the universities of applied sciences, but it is still underestimated in comparison to educational pillar or aspect and research and development. There are very diverse understanding of what can regional involvement mean across the partner countries, which cover also Estonia, Hungary, Ireland, and Flemish community of Belgium. We can see that the impact and indicator and the relevant indicators are not all usually suitable and fitting the purpose. There is a strong focus on learning and teaching activities. And when it comes to research, there is still this academic aspect and focus on publications. We can see that in measuring the activities, we quite often still focus on input, how many students, how many formal partnerships are developed, where the attention to outcomes and impact are not that strong, although there are some good examples from Ireland and to some extent from Flanders. And we can see that the answer might be the qualitative self-reflection of the achievements. Thanks, please, Fede. Well, I guess that there's nothing that new to comment, that we can see that it is the necessity to engage with the stakeholders, and we believe that the universities of applied sciences are well positioned to do that, because they can act as the regional hubs connecting the businesses, the public sector, the community in the region. We need to have a more proactive engagement. And when we were discussing how to sort of deal with the situation further on, we will obviously rely on some sort of measurable data and indicators, but we can see more and more that we have to come up with some sort of self-assessment, self-evaluation tool, which will help us to build the narrative of what the institutions do based on some evidence and based on some peer review. Well, I have to say that this project is part of the so-called HE Innovate linked project financed by the Commission. And we are trying to look as well how we can use the HE Innovate tool, which is the self-assessment, self-evaluation tool for further development of entrepreneurship of higher education institutions. Thank you. Well, I guess that I have said most of that. We would obviously call for strengthening the role. We would like to ask for the policy framework, but also the financial frameworks for doing that. In fact, we are just today adopting the EURASHE statement for the ministerial conference in the European higher education area, which will take place in 2 days. And we mentioned there the need to sort of focus on the role of universities of applied sciences in regional activities. That's basically all. I guess that you can read the statements. Next, please, Fede. Okay. And although we are still going to have this workshop webinar, we want to make this a series of cases focusing on experience from different countries. So I can promote, and I will get back to that at the end again. There will be another one which will look at the experience with the role of higher education institution in smart specialization of the region, and focus on Basque country, on Basque region, on the 2nd of December. And I can see that there were questions about the presentations. Yes, the presentations will be shared after the webinar. So thank you very much. And I would, unless there were any questions which I couldn't have seen, oh, can't hear, sorry. But I can see that most of the other people didn't have that issue, so I hope that the problem was solved. Okay, I would give the floor now to Alexander Almeida, the coordinator of the National Strategy for Smart Specialization at the National Innovation Agency in Portugal. And if you would have any questions about EURASHE, our role, please raise it in the chat, or questions and answers. Alexander, please go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, good morning to you all. It's a pleasure to be here with you and discussing smart specialization. I will start by the basics, because 13 years ago or 11 years ago, there was no smart specialization concept, and it's still very new. Furthermore, it's still a little bit complex, not only to understand, but mostly to implement. And this has created lots of issues in terms of designing the strategies and implementing the strategies, as well as which are the roles of each stakeholder within this process of devising and designing a smart specialization strategy. I will attempt to share my screen. Hopefully it works, so that I can, and someone confirm me that you are seeing my screen.
Yes, we do. You are much better than I am.
So I will try to introduce a little bit the national landscape of smart specialization. I will do a very brief presentation on this matter and try to discuss or fill some topics of discussion for the panel that will follow. And I will start by highlighting the results. In the end of the day, any innovation strategy, and especially smart specialization, is about results. And although it's too soon to start seeing the results of smart specialization strategy per se, if we are considering the strategy developed in the beginning of this current programming period, the fact is that when you look at Portugal, we have seen significant progress on the left side map. The left side map comes from the Regional Innovation Scoreboard and highlights what has been the characteristics of Portugal in terms of innovation, inputs and outputs. In the last decades, there has been a strong investment in capacitating the research and innovation system so that regions and the country as a whole could converge effectively with the European leading regions in terms of technology and innovation. And hence, for the first time, we have also North and Centro in the green area, which are the innovation leaders, okay, not as dark as the Central Europe, but which are the innovation leaders, and so we are in the front platoon of the research and innovation Europe-wide. These progresses are more astonishing if we compare for instance, our neighboring country, Spain, or even Italy, where traditionally Portugal was lagging behind, and at least to some extent we have been able to deal with this. But the right-hand side map shows us the puzzle. Left side tells us that we have been more proficient in terms of innovation, but the right-hand side tells us that we are still poor. We are still convergence regions. We are still a country with a GDP per capita below 75% of EU 27 average. This means that for some reason, the effects that we were able to create on the innovation system have not transmitted, have not transferred on an effective way to the economy. There are many reasons behind this. One is the differences in the times of adjustment. Universities and the knowledge production system is much faster in adapting to changes in the incentives rather than the economy. Economy faces always a structural change process that endures a long time, and so this will take time. But this has also highlighted the need to be more efficient in the way we deliver these science and technology results to the economy and the way we transfer them more effectively, giving rise to an understanding on which priorities we should focus on. And I think that these two maps serve me the purpose of starting this discussion. One simple aspect. Why do we care about smart specialization? What is it for? Smart specialization is about identifying priorities. I will discuss the way we do it, but it's about identifying priorities. And why are these important? Science policy in Portugal, innovation policy in Portugal, started decades ago. We have progressed a lot, but in the beginning, these policies targeted quantity effects or mass effects, which means that priority setting was not a priority. In other words, considering that we had a small enrollment rate of the students in the tertiary education, considering that companies were still very low tech and integrating a very small amount of knowledge in their production, considering that the research institutions were still underdeveloped and were in need of creating critical mass to be proficient in integrating European networks. All considered, the Portuguese science and technology policy focused mostly on mass. So it didn't matter if we were targeting aeronautics or health. What it mattered is that we needed to produce education. We needed to produce science independently on the focus because we were lagging so much behind that we needed to create a scientific and an innovation community that could support strategy afterwards. We are now on the verge of a change. Following the entry into the 21st century, the external shocks that impacted severely on the Portuguese economy, especially the Uruguay round and the Marrakesh trade agreements that opened the frontiers and exposed us to Chinese exports. We needed to reconfigure this whole system. And so we started continued investing on a mass effect, but we end up in 2013 in a better position, of course, with more inputs, but somehow the transformation of these inputs and outputs into outcomes was still not sufficient to drive a growth strategy that is more steep. So smart specialization targets just that, targets the idea that beyond the mass effect that we created, we need to find a more targeted priorities so that the results, the convergence of different policy tools can amplify the translation of those results into economic outcome. And this was a little bit the rationale in Portugal to implement smart specialization and to adhere on this smart specialization. This led to a Portuguese landscape that is a little bit complex. The Portuguese landscape covers a national-wide smart specialization and 7 regional strategies. They were developed in tandem, which means that smart specialization on a national level was developed in low articulation with regional smart specialization strategies, which has created throughout this programming period some issues of overlapping and sometimes even misleading stakeholders in terms of which were the priorities within the country and the regions. But this multi-level setting makes full sense if we can conceive smart specialization as, on one hand, addressing the macro trends that all countries and regions will be facing, of course, adapting that to the reality of Portugal, combined with a more verticalized approach that mixes these macro trends with regional specificities. What we have learned from smart specialization implementation is that it is pretty much a bottom-up process that is generated on the territories, and where the articulation of actors is crucial for an effective translation of that strategy into policy tools. And so we decided to implement smart specialization, especially within the regional setting, because for us in Portugal it became clear that we needed to focus more our policy mix. We needed to drive more results out of our R&D investment, and we needed to accelerate transformation of the Portuguese economy. Adding to this, one issue that is quite relevant, and sometimes we don't mention it, which is relative to our catching up position. Portugal is on a catching up position, which means that we are not on the technological frontier. When we are targeting mass effect and excellent science, we are targeting the technology frontier. And this is relevant, of course, to upgrade the capacity of our institutions. However, we also must acknowledge that the fact that we are in a catching up position provides us some advantages to grow faster using the leader's effort. And again, smart specialization can help us balance a little bit this rationale and help us find a way to position ourselves adequately in terms of the global competitiveness landscape. And for us, I think that the most important aspect that comes out of smart specialization is the process. It's a process of being humble and understanding that unlike what we would like, we will not be top-notch on every single scientific domain or innovation domain. So we need to select, we need to choose on which grounds we can actually compete on better terms. We need to focus resources around those grounds, and we need this to be the result of a collective process. One of the key takeaways from smart specialization is this collective nature of designing the strategy and inducing the participation of stakeholders in the process of policy making. We were not excellent, we were far from excellent in doing so during this programming period. The regions did it better than the national level, but this preconception that strategy and policy is open to society and can be improved through the society's inputs is actually very important, not only to mobilize the actors, but most of all, to improve the design of the instruments and the way we implement policy. So if it's clear what we want from smart specialization and why we should care, I would say that it's important to say if we did care. And I don't have a straight answer for it. I would say that across Europe and the Portuguese case as well, we cared to some extent. Smart specialization was adopted by most regions and all countries, especially the ones using ERDF for thematic objective 1. It was adopted because on one hand it was an imposition, on the other hand the regions and countries started becoming more conscious of the importance of the subject and how useful it could be. But in reality, the governance aspects of smart specialization, the implementation of policy of smart specialization, indicates that on many levels we did not care enough for smart specialization to actually drive it through to its original goals. And so this is the case of Portugal. We are on the verge of revising the strategies and creating a different architecture, a multi-level conception that somehow combines the broadband priorities on the national level, and these broadband priorities tend to be horizontal in nature and follow the macro trends that are common to the world, but adapted to the Portuguese context, with a more verticalized approach from regions, which combines those macro trends with the structural characteristics of each region, so that the final exercise is a little bit more intelligent and a little bit more smart. I can show you the result of the National Smart Specialization that is now under revision. This is the original result. Portuguese had around 15 topics of priority. On my opinion, excessive. We are doing a revision work that aims to reduce these to more or less half of these topics. Probably a little bit less than half. 40% to be exact. But the idea was that the smart specialization was the juxtaposition or the paralleling a set of priorities that were linked to the value chains present in the country. And to some extent, this was not a transformative strategy. This was an indicative strategy. And what we envisaged is a transformative strategy to use smart specialization as a rationale to transform the way we set up the economic system and we set up the innovation system towards better results. And on this combination, the territorial aspect is crucial. For instance, when you think of low density regions, if we think of low density regions at which economic dynamics are already feeble, smart specialization is crucial to find the adequate positioning for those regions to redevelop dynamics. So you cannot fight reality. We need to adapt to reality. As Darwin used to say, it's not the fittest that survives, it's the one that adapts the best that survives. And this is a little bit the story of smart specialization. Those 15 domains, we did some kind of network analysis, etc. These 15 domains show different patterns of interconnection. We have a core set of domains that have significant connections among themselves: energy, ICT, production technologies, and materials. Those are the 5 core elements. A second tier of industrial value chains that are linked but on a second tier, and then we have what we call the wildcards or outliers, which were the national political bets, but not so much sustained in terms of data. I would say that we have lots of network analysis also to understand the connections between the regional and the national priorities, but I would use the rest of the time to highlight a couple of things that worry me, and then to discuss the role of polytechnical schools, applied sciences universities in this process. Firstly, I try to, in a very short time, to explain a little bit what we did with smart specialization, the why we did it, why we try to implement it as seriously as possible. We know that on an everyday basis, smart specialization is not as relevant as it should be across Europe. And Portugal is not an exception, but I think to some extent is a good example. But we still have a long way to go. And I will start with some glitches that we have in the planning that are fundamental before going to entrepreneurial discovery and also discussing the role of higher education institutions in this process. First of all, instruments are commonly detached from strategy, which means that, and this is a problem that comes from EU, from European Commission. The top instrument, policy instrument, to implement smart specialization, even though we should consider other types of policy instruments from a national level, but the top instrument is linked to ERDF. And what we know is that ERDF-based programs, operational programs, are defined in absolute detachment from strategy. Sometimes we develop the programs first and the strategy later. Not only this is a logical mistake, because we are conceiving the vaccine for a disease that we don't know and we don't have yet, but it also creates misleading incentives. Because in the end of the day, and I think that most of you are aware, managers of the operational programs are evaluated by the rate at which they spend the money. So they don't want the hassle of having governance systems that are complex or require consultation, or even trying to do thematic approaches on calls, because they are evaluated solely on how compliant they are formally and how fast they spend the money. And so this, associated with the fact that the design of the instruments is prior to the definition of the strategy, or at best is detached, creates a complex problem in this scenario. So what can applied sciences institutions do in this process? First of all, the participation of all actors is relevant to stimulate policymakers to actually open the black box and allow for the participation of actors in the process of smart specialization, and in the process of fine-tuning policy instruments to smart specialization strategy goals. I'll give you an example. What we observed in Portugal is that with very, very, very rare examples, no thematic calls were launched. This implies that we are using broadband instruments to cater to the specificities of very different priorities. And to some they fit okay, but to others they fit poorly. And so it's normal that the instruments are not effective because they were not designed for that priority. And this is the first issue. The second issue is about the coordination of different instruments. and this is also a difficulty that we have in the landscape of policy making, which is in order to actually be competent in delivering strategy, we need to make converge in a timely manner a set of different policy instruments. And this was not possible within this programming period. So there's no sequentiality to actually create smooth transition, for instance, from an RTD project to an innovation project or a company project. But where do applied sciences universities stand in this puzzle? We are lacking integrating agents that have the ability, on one hand, to foresight, so that can understand which are the trends, which are the technological developments, which are the business model developments within certain value chains, because policymakers will always be myopic on that level. We don't have the resources, the time, the profile to actually do it in a very sound way. So we need that foresight, and we need agents within the territory that somehow can incorporate the rationale of smart specialization and build the bridges between the actors. One of the shortcomings of Portuguese innovation system, which is well known from the Portuguese side, and you can see in the international reports, is cooperation. We are a country where low levels of cooperation still exist, and we need agents that somehow generate an integration process that bring people together. So they are the party organizers. They are the wedding planners. They are the ones that make it happen. And this is where I think that universities, and especially applied sciences universities, have a key role in this place. Universities of applied sciences are territorially bound. So they have a strong presence and a strong relevance within a territory. They have the acknowledgement of the other stakeholders, because from the standpoint of an entrepreneur, it's harder to follow another entrepreneur as a leader. But it's easier to accept that there is a leader that is not a competitor, and that could be an actual champion in terms of smart specializations priorities within that territory, integrating stakeholders, integrating the production capacity, integrating the research capacities in order to develop, understand, design, and implement a solution to those challenges that these regions face. And this is one of the key aspects that I think that applied sciences universities have to do, or should do, or could do. They can be very important for us in operationalizing all this, in creating a practical rationale on how this strategy translates into common projects, translates into actions. And it's on the verge of these two worlds that we need this kind of actor supporting us and providing us information, and also leading the processes of integrating these actors. I would say also that, going back to foresight, this is something that is very relevant. And unfortunately, in Portugal, apart from a few exceptions, cluster policy has been discontinued. And this means that clusters, which also could do part of this assignment, are not doing that, and are not capable to do it, apart again from a few set of exceptions. And this means that polytechnical schools can be fundamental in linking these agents, in creating local and territorial ecosystems that can respond effectively to the rationales of smart specialization, and can help us in an organized way to fine-tune the policy tools. One of the shortcomings of Portugal in this aspect was also governance. And governance failed on many levels for many different reasons. Firstly, after we delivered smart specialization and ex-ante conditionality was approved, the pressure to maintain the process reduced. And so people went on with their lives and with executing operational programs, and smart specialization cared less in people's lives. But there's also a different thing. In order to have a working governance model, we need to find the actors that can lead this process on the territories. Let's face it, on the national level, we can have opinion makers, we can have even national champions, but they will be pointing into broad directions. They will be pointing to those macro trends. And those are the ones you can easily access through Google. We need mobilizing effects on the regional level. We need the governance to work on the regional level. We need the stakeholders consultation process to undergo on the territorial level. And here is where I think that universities and higher education institutions and applied science universities have the major role. Foresight, leading the process in inducing cooperation, and finally, stressing the question of integration. Integration is not just about building the bridges. We need someone that actually adds intelligence to the process, combines that foresight exercise with the extensive knowledge of the territory to actually find ways of sewing all this together and creating anchor projects, creating action plans that can actually deliver forward the strategy. And so a little bit what I was saying is this, that on participation, we need to foster participation more. We need to keep this process going. We need to find those champions that can talk regularly with management authorities and ask for thematic calls, ask for adjustments in the policy tools, and implement a truly participatory process in design, implementation, and monitoring. I highlighted the question of governance. Governance was probably the weakest link in all this process because of the macro structures that unfortunately did not work or worked to a certain extent and worked better on regions. I'm shutting down. Worked better on regions than in national level. The monitoring aspect that is also crucial to inform people of what we are doing and everybody is doing. And this is important also to have a clear notion of why we are using smart specialization, why we should care, and keep on communicating this to people, because we lost the momentum in smart specialization. We created a buzz 7-8 years ago. We created momentum, but then we let people down. This is my feeling. And so we need to recreate the buzz, but we need communication, and the best people to do it are applied sciences universities because of their positioning within the innovation system. And so, as I mentioned to you, there's a new architecture being forged. I will stop sharing my screen so that I can shut up. This architecture hopefully is a little bit more elegant than in the past. At least that's our goal. For the first time in Portugal, we are developing in partnership the national and the 7 regional authorities. So we have an informal technical group that is the national level and the 7 regional levels, and we are doing this strategy in an articulated way so that there's reduced overlap, there's more complementarity, there's more elegance within this architecture and the way we devise the policy tools. And this was a major advance in comparison to the previous exercise. And this is something that makes us very proud. We were able to also to support regions and develop their own strategy, giving them experts and providing them what JRC was able to do with us previously before. And so I think this is the way to go. And I'll shut up so that all of you can also speak and say much more intelligent and elegant things that I did. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Alexander. I think it was a wonderful overview, and thanks for that. And congratulations that you managed to put the presentation on the screen, so which shows the advance. In the meantime, we got a number of further attendees, so the good word about the interesting presentations spread all over the world. I even can see in the questions and answers someone with some Indian name asking what would be the title of what would be the job of such a connecting agent. But there was very lively discussion in the chat, and thank you for that, especially between colleagues with experience from OECD, Raffaele Trapasso and Jana Puka, about what's the role of the universities of applied sciences, what's the capacity, and what do we do with the institutions which are operating in underdeveloped or deprived regions where the actors are weak. I think we can have that as the input for the panel, because we are getting a little bit short of time, and you will have still space, Alexander, to address that. And thank you for the insight, because in a number of things we share the view. We are in the position to play this sort of connecting role. We are in a position to link the local level and region needs through the academic connections with the academic knowledge on the global level. So we are able to bring the experience from our peers from international environment. So it is really something, but there is a need for support. So let's see how the Portuguese universities of applied sciences dealt with the situation. And we will start with Felipe Chaves, Dean of the School for Professional Higher Education at the Polytechnic Institute of Cavado and Abe. I understand from the North region, so that's one of those which were mentioned. Felipe, please go ahead.
Well, thank you. I would like to say hello to everyone. And of course, I would like to thank EURASHE for inviting IPCA for this webinar. I will try to share my screen. Let me see if I can. Okay, I believe you are seeing this.
Yes,
can you see it?
Yeah, yes. If you can start the presentation on the full screen, that may help as well to make it more visible. Thanks.
Okay, so I was saying, IPCA is located in the north of Portugal, in the Minho province. It's a region known for its significant economy, activity, and young population. In fact, Braga was European Youth Capital in 2012. It has over 1 million inhabitants and is a key development agent in the region and an important Portuguese reference. Precisely, Cavado and Ave has, moreover, 800 inhabitants. And we are located in a territorial unit for statistics that is known as NUT 3, that is structured by the Cavado River basin and the sea, bordering the sea, and Viana do Castelo. It is a very heterogeneous territory with rural counties and also mountain, and dense municipalities like Braga. And this is a region with a very much industrialized region, comprised mostly of small and medium enterprises. And we are operating in Barcelos, Braga, Guimarães, and Vila Nova de Famalicão. That is known as the 4 big cities of this region. As a matter of fact, Vila Nova de Famalicão is the 3rd biggest exporter municipality of Portugal, and it is the 1st in the northern region of Portugal. In terms of economy, this region is responsible for more than 6,700 million euros of exports. And if you look at the main characteristics of this region, mostly we are comprised of small and medium-sized enterprises, approximately 90,000 of those, and we are specialized in textile and also in manufacturing industries. IPCA has five schools, five dynamic schools, design, management, engineering and technology, hospitality and tourism. And the last one is dedicated to professional short cycle courses. We have a student population of around 5,000 students and more than 420 teaching, technical and administrative staff, so faculty. And we are a reference in the Portuguese higher education landscape. In numbers, we can see here that we have 5 locations, and we are talking about a new school that is going to start probably next year in Esposende. We have 3 R&D units, 14 bachelor degrees, 22 master degrees, 21 short cycle technical courses, 120 international partnerships, and 360 international students. That this year, this was a little bit affected by COVID, but these were the numbers of last year. So, in terms of projects, we have 20 R&D and investigation projects, and we have 4 patents and 2 models, and 1 patent is being commercialized for over 1 million euros. And coming to smart specialization strategy for the North region, we have, of course, RIS 3 that was defined by the CCDRN, that is the North Portugal Coordination and Development Commission, responsible for the smart specialization strategy for North. And we all know this innovation, advanced usage, resources and assets, and all of these come together with public policies that Alexandra has already talked about. And in IPCA, we have 3 research centers, that is 2 IE, it's Applied Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. We have also a research center on accounting and taxation, and a research institute for design, media and culture that is in collaboration with Aveiro and Porto University. In terms of the strategy for the North region, we have 8 well-defined areas of smart specialization, divided in nuclear, emerging, and wildcards. IPCA has more than 30 projects addressing some of these priority domains, with more than 1.4 million euros in this participation. I will address some of our projects from the Research Center on Accounting and Taxation. We are focused on human capital and specialized service. And also symbolic capital, technology, and tourism, because we have a School of Tourism that is working on this. And we are seeing here some of the works that some of the projects, research projects that this center is developing, mostly in financial and reports, in close collaboration with municipalities. IPCA is responsible for a Portuguese municipalities accountability. That is very important for Portugal, and also tax education and citizenship, and other projects in this area. Also, with the Applied Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, we have different focus, in this case, health and life science, and you can see here different projects that we are addressing in this area, and also in the advanced production systems, with maintenance, with collaboration with companies like Bosch, and then also for mobility, industries and environment, and symbolic capital and technology and tourism, again, with more projects in this area developed by 2i. Also, in the Design Research Institute for Design, Media and Culture, we have several projects addressing a multitude of interests like culture, creativity and fashion, advanced production system, human capitalized and specialization, services, health and science also. And last but not least, because we are talking about human capital and specialized service, IPCA, as a professional short cycle course school. So we are very dynamic in this area. We have approximately 1,014 students only in short cycle higher education. This is a very important collaboration because we have more than 400 internships every year in collaboration with regional companies, and all these courses are addressed and are prepared accordingly to the company's interest. So we have courses like advanced welding that are taught in the company with the company technicians and are being very, very well succeeded. And this is interesting for the regional connection with companies. Also, we have some stakeholders like business, social, cultural, innovation, entrepreneurship, among others, like professional schools, high schools, other higher education institutions, research and technology centers, and also in the social and cultural, business and companies, government, of course, is very important, municipalities, and mainly is our way of addressing this smart specialization strategy. So, trying to accomplish the 10 minutes for my presentation, I would like to thank you, and I will welcome your questions at the end. I will stop sharing this. I hope you.
Thank you, Felipe. I'm sorry because we are getting a little bit short of time. The benefit of having webinars is that people can ask you concretely within the chat. So I would leave that now for the chat in order to have space for the other experiences. But indeed, sort of focus on bringing together skills and innovation is something, again, what we see as the further development. So I would pass the floor now to Ana Sargento, the Vice President of the Polytechnic Institute of Lira. Please, would you share your experience, Ana, and as well, let's please try to keep the time. Thank you.
Thank you. I have shared my presentation. I would like to check if it is already being seen by you.
Yes, perfect.
For your invitation. It's an honor for us to be here and to have the opportunity to share our point of view on this important topic and also to learn from others' experiences. For the sake of keeping up with time, I will just provide a brief context. I would like this to pass on. It's not working. I don't know why. Okay. So just to provide a brief context about our institution, we have about 13,000 students currently, 5 faculties in different areas from technology, social sciences, arts, and so on. And we also have a lot of different programs, undergraduate programs, postgraduate, and as IPCA, we also have short cycle courses, and recently we were approved on our first PhD degree in collaboration with the university, because in Portugal we can't do it by ourselves by now. On its turn, Region Centro is, as the name suggests, located in the central part of Portugal. It has over 2 million inhabitants. It represents about 18% of Portuguese GDP, and concerning regional expenditure in R&D, it is well below the target which was established some years ago by the European Union. We are 1.3% of GDP in R&D. I will organize my presentation along these 3 dimensions, S3 design, S3 implementation and systematic evaluation, and focusing on what was our role in the programming period referring to 2014-2020. Regarding S3 design, we were actually engaged as an external stakeholder in several meetings which were promoted by CCDRC. This is the Central Coordinated Commission for Region Development, as part of a bottom-up strategy, reflection and design, aiming to define priority domains. And I must say that there is an open channel between Polytechnic of Leiria and CCDRC at all times. But I really believe our role goes well beyond this direct participation, as we, in a certain way, were able to contribute to capacity building in regional strategic planning, as we were, during the last years, involved in the formulation of several strategic plans for, with and for many government entities and associations belonging to Region Center. Just a few examples: we were involved in formulating the community-led local development plan in one of the regions of Region Center, municipality development plans, thematic plans in tourism, forest, and so on. And these plans were naturally framed by S3 priority domains. As a result of this first design stage, these were the selected 8 thematic domains for Region Central, and the region also defined 4 innovation hubs, which is somewhat original in the country. Turning to implementation, we believe we... Sorry? We had an important and direct and indirect role in implementation. For those who don't know so well, Polytechnic of Leiria, our motto actually is knowledge at the service of society, and we are very much focused on regional development. We were able to submit and execute about 230 R&D projects, of which 31 were actually funded by the operational program Centro 2020, involving more than 14 million euros of funding. And which is something which is very important for us, the majority of R&D projects were developed in co-creation with SMEs of the region or other organizations. But we also played an important role on the demand side. I mean, in building the necessary absorption capacity on the SMEs side. And this is achieved, as well as Ipke referred, by the promotion of executive advanced programs, upskilling and reskilling programs, long life learning, and so on. Another important vehicle is the promotion of entrepreneurship. And this is done by stimulating their appearance and supporting knowledge-based spin-offs deriving from R&D developed at Polytechnic of Leiria. But I couldn't miss this opportunity to mention another very important victory for us, and I say us together with Ipke, because Ipke is in fact one of our partners, which was the approval of Regional University Network, the recent approval of a European University Alliance, which is really focused on regional development and provision of important competences and skills that are needed by the region. And it has 2 very specific outputs concerning 3 European innovation hubs, which are in sustainable industries, bioeconomy, and social innovation, and also the creation at the end of this project of an European zone for interregional development. And I believe this will be very important for the next S3 period in Region Centro, and we have a huge responsibility here. Here are just some examples of R&D projects in which we participated. I won't go through all of them, just for you to have an idea of this link between our R&D projects and the 8 thematic priorities defined by Region Center. In terms of evaluation, once again, Polytechnic of Leiria was invited to participate in a series of meetings organized by CCDRC to assess implementation. And in fact, I must emphasize that Region Centro was the only Portuguese region to promote a revision of S3 during the period, engaging again all the external stakeholders. But I would like to add that we are willing to, and we believe we have the inherent competencies to be more active on impact assessment of the overall strategy. And this is just a tip for what I will say right after. So to finalize, and we believe that there is still huge work to be completed, and in spite of the great job that we recognize to CDRC during this period, I would like to share our opinion about what didn't work so well. And in fact, what I will say is very much linked to what Alexandre said before in several aspects. In relation to the design, there was a problem which is already identified, that S3 was defined after the partnership agreement PT 2020 and after the definition of the operation program at the regional level. But this could not be a problem. There are another problems adding to this one. One is that the priority domains were defined too broadly, and there was a lack of specific goals assigned to each one. Then, in the implementation stage, the priority domains acted merely as alignment and selection criteria of submitted projects. And sometimes, I must say, this alignment was, I would say, slightly forced in order to comply with the topics of the S3 strategy. And as Alexandre said before, there were no specific or thematic calls aligned directly with each priority domain. And this was the most important problem, I believe. Looking at the evaluation, I believe that there is a lack of a cost-benefit analysis at the end of each project. And the organisms, the agencies, and for example, CCDRC, they are much more concerned with the financial execution than with the actual activities implementation. And this has its justification, as we heard before. Also, it is very difficult to assess the overall impact of S3 in the region's competitive advantage and development. And this has to do not only, but also with the statistics that are delayed when we need to look at them. They are looking at the past and not at the present moment. And most of all, whether this is or not related with the fact that there were priority domains. To finalize my presentation, a brief reflection on these different signs, a positive and a negative one. In fact, Region Centro is currently a strong innovator according to Regional Innovation Scoreboard 2019, but a strongly innovative region that simultaneously presents 17% of population at the risk of poverty and is lagging behind the national average in terms of GDP per capita. And this has not improved in the several 25 years, in fact. Clearly, this is a clear sign of structural bottlenecks that must be surpassed and that are preventing the results of innovation to transmit and to create spillover effects to all the region. So I believe that the effort should not be limited to a greater allocation of funds to this area, but also encompass a closer and more effective monitoring of the spillover effects generated by the supported investments to all the region and how these gains derived from innovation pass throughout the society in general. So this was my brief presentation, and actually I will welcome and be very curious to look at the other experiences and welcome your questions as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Very nice, very instructive presentation. Although we are sort of on very tight schedule, I can see that there are two comments in the chat. Raffaele Trapasso was asking if you can say something more about the tools and institutions that your University of Applied Sciences has created to connect to the small and medium-sized enterprises. That would be probably something if you can briefly reflect on that. The second is the comment from my colleague Vaidotas Viljunas about the measuring the impact, measuring the indicators, which is the topic which we are struggling with within the project which I mentioned. But I would probably leave this up to the panel discussion after the presentations, and I would also like to make space for the representatives of the polytechnics within the panel, because you are much more in touch with the reality than I should comment on. But can you say something about the tools for the connection with the SMEs, please?
I'm not sure if I understood it right, but the question was about the indicators.
No. The question now is, there was what tools and institutions have you created to connect to small and medium-sized enterprises? That was referring to your engagement with local businesses. If you can say something more about that approach.
In fact, we have different vehicles and different tools to connect to SMEs. One of them, very important, is our research centers. We are much focused on applied research. We have currently 15 research centers positively evaluated by the national agency FCT, and they are all very focused on applied research. Our researchers are an important vehicle. They are every day connected with the SMEs, managers and people. And I would say that we are the national champion in co-promotion projects with the help of a national agency for innovation. So that is one of the important vehicles to connect to firms, co-promotion projects. And even if not in this label, we develop very much other R&D projects in cooperation with companies, and not only companies, but also with associations, municipalities, and so on. And this is because of our applied nature of research. Also, our incubators, we don't have our own incubators and accelerators, but we are partners of several incubators in the region, and we work closely in order to stimulate the appearance of spin-offs. That's another important vehicle to cooperate with firms, is to make them being born. Actually, if they are based on knowledge derived from R&D at Polytechnic of Leiria, we believe they will be more competitive and strong. So by now, I would just mention these two examples for the sake of time, but I can think a little bit more and later on to give more information on it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you also for mentioning the European University Initiative. Indeed, this is something where we have quite high expectations to learn from, and it's amazing that in the second round there were I think about 17 universities of applied sciences which became the part of the pilot alliances. Some of them composed mostly from universities of applied sciences, and in fact we want in the next year to create a group where we would be sharing the experience among those who are engaged in the alliances, because we believe that this would be amazing opportunity to raise the issues which are sort of crossing beyond the national frameworks, like quality assurance, cooperation, but also shared knowledge. And I could have seen that those alliances are very much focused on regional engagement, where I knew about what was the direction. So that could be another topic for further learning. Thank you very much. I saw in the beginning of the chat that there was a comment to Alexandro, sorry for learning the Portuguese pronunciation, that the part of the southern yellow color was that the region is composed of sub-regions which may have probably a little bit different profile. And I understand that Luis URASHE, the Vice President of Polytechnic Institute of Porto Alegre, is coming from that region. So maybe we can see some of the insights how the southern colleagues deal with the issue. Luis, please.
So I will start by sharing my screen. I believe that you are now on full mode version, right? So just before starting, thank you to EURASHE for inviting the Polytechnic of Porto Alegre for this webinar. We are very pleased to be here. I will jump really fast over the presentation of the Polytechnic. I will say just that we are a small size University of Applied Sciences and a very active and dynamic one who works directly in cooperation with the regional coordination in the application of the Smart Specialization Strategy. As you probably know, the Alentejo is exactly the region that was shown up by Alexandre in yellow, and so it means that we are not as active as probably we should be. But I would say that the Alentejo region, representing 1/3 of our country, it's a very low, densely populated region, which in fact creates some problems, but in some points, it is also an advantage. And sometimes for the application of the Smart Specialization Strategy, it might be seen as a very, very key active point for development. And so we believe that working together with the region, we can somehow convert the RIS3 to be converted not in a sieve, but in a catalyzer of the region. And we do believe that that is one of the greatest problems that we have when we defined our specialization strategy. The regional specialization strategy from Alentejo is based on 5 specific domains, and those are natural and environmental resources, heritage, culture and creative industries, food and forestry, energy and smart mobility, and social economy technologies and services. And those 5, as Anna just mentioned before, somehow function in a certain way as a blocker for all the projects that were not directly aligned with these domains. And that, in our perspective, could be seen as a problem for regional development. And so what we try to do was that we try to cooperate with the region, and we try to create a common speech as a higher education institution on the region that could somehow help us reinforce this. And we did that through a process that was somehow very popular at the moment and within those 10 years of RIS3, and that was we tried to apply all those 5 domains under a common structure, which was somehow based under the domain of circular economy. And we created, together with more than 60 different entities, SMEs, international partners, national partners, regional partners, something that we called FECA, which is the Forum for Circular Economy of the Regional Alentejo, and that somehow helped us to cross all the 5 domains. And I would say that one of the main aspects that the region has was this: we took advantage not only from the size of the region, but also from its characteristics and its insertion into the natural and sustainable environment, and we used the theme of circular economy as a basis to reinforce and implement all the 5 domains of the Smart Specialization Strategy. And I believe that was, in fact, one of the key aspects that, as an institution, we could somehow help the region to reinforce its position. And this is so clear that now that we are reviewing the Smart Specialization Strategy, circular economy will be one of the domains that will be integrated on this aspect. And so what I would say in this thing is that when we're looking upon a strategy and focusing on the subject of this webinar, which would be smart UASH in smart regions, I think that would be one of the main relevant aspects that we had in this process. This is to say, we were able to work together with the region, to work together with the industry of the region, to work together with SMEs, and to work together with all the other scientific and technological partners to develop a strategy that could somehow function as a glue for the region. And so we started, first of all, to try to cooperate in terms of regional assessment aligned with the national policies. And so we did, I believe, a great job in that specific sector, focusing in 5 different domains related somehow with the 5 domains that were listed on the Smart Specialization Strategy. And so doing that, we entered in a domain that, as a specific institution, we tried to focus in problems and aspects that were somehow key for the region. And so, considering our research institution and also our research center, we focused on the main aspects in which we had some capacity already implemented, and that could somehow reinforce the strategy that was visioned and tried to implemented by the regional commission. And so those are 4 of the main aspects and main domains that we have focused, related to energy and waste valorization, with the problem that we have in this region, which is associated with construction and demolition wastes, and also related to eco-design and agro-business and sustainable development. And focusing on that, I will show you somehow the kind of, I will say, strategy that we try to implement together with the region, and how we managed to implement, using a design thinking perspective and approach, how we could implement this, focusing very briefly, five specific, I would say, steps towards the implementation of our projects. And the first one was somehow, and because the region is a region with a very sparse density of SMEs, we had to get everybody on board. And getting everybody on board mean to have people aligned with the strategy and the vision. And so what we did, we focus on the idea that perspective and the perspective people have on the smart specialization strategy would be almost everything. And in a region with such a great landscape and such a great natural asset as is the case of the Alentejo region, what we tried to implement was to focus on very specific and well-developed projects that could work and function as an inspiration to the others to get along. For example, a very good example and an internationally known one is the case of Delta. Delta has been working on sustainable issues and circular economy issues since 1961. And that is the first date that we know that they have started to think about how they would deal with the surplus and the residues from their industry. And this is something really important for us as a region, because if you focus, for example, on sustainable development, the beginning of the concept is from 1987. And so in 1961, a region and a company from a region was already started with this. And so we try to work with the industry, with their problems, and try to solve them based on research. This is a very good example from our circular lab, which is located in the Polytechnic of Porto Alegre, that has worked with somehow the surplus and the residues from coffee. And you know that in Portugal, we are a very, I would say, enthusiastic coffee drinkers and espresso drinkers. And so we deal with it, and we try to create value over the residues of our industry. And this is an example that we have worked with Delta, and that we have managed to create pellets out of coffee residues in order to heat and create energy. Another very good example is the example from Espurão, which actually has worked on a very sustainable way, and we have somehow worked in line with this policy to save water in the region. I'm not really sure if you are aware or not, but for example, in average, we will use around 4.6, 4.7 liters of water to produce a liter of wine. And this company in Alentejo is currently on 1.2 liters of water to produce 1 liter of wine. And this is somehow some of the projects that we try to give that perspective and show it is possible, even in a region that, as Alexandre showed, is colored with yellow, and meaning that this is not as active. This is another interesting project from the region that is based on one of the major domains and research domains that we have, which is agribusiness. And this is a completely circular model which has been implemented in agriculture in the region. Another very good example is the reuse of plastics for creating activated carbon, and this is also very, very important. Another very good example in which the Polytechnic took a lead, it was the creation of sustainable design for family companies and medium and small size companies in order to reinforce the sustainability and the circularity of the economy. And so as a sum up, I would say that our position towards the smart specialization strategy and the position from the Polytechnic of Porto Alegre in order to reinforce this Alentejo region as a smart region was somehow to try to take advantage from the capacity that we have, but also from the characteristics of the region and from the things that we knew that were there, but that needed to be reinforced in order to become great. And so we tried to work with the region in order to apply something which was really smart, but that was at the same time specific, that, as Anna mentioned before, that was measurable, because it is very important for us to see the impact of the project that we are running and how do they work, not only has a research aspect, but also on the impact that they have at the finish of the project. Also, they needed to be attainable, but most of all, they needed to be relevant for the region and time-based, because somehow we understood that some of our SMEs and our family and micro business were not developing along with the region, because there was they were having a hard time to start. And so we tried to work with the region, giving them the idea, which is the idea I will be handing with, which is that you don't need to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. And that was our policy regarding the objectives of our implementation on the smart specialization strategy. And I will, without false modesties, I believe that the way that we have worked with the region was very significant, not only because, as I mentioned at the beginning, currently circular economy will definitely be one of the next domains of the smart specialization for 2030, but also because we managed to have great results out of the almost 70 projects that we have run through this period together with the region. So thank you, and I'll be available for any questions.
Thank you, Luis. Well, when I was listening to that, and I know that it's important to show the concrete cases, and we really enjoyed that. I just wanted to invite all of you as well to share these cases with us, because for the next year we are planning to come up with a summary and lessons learned from the series on smart specialization, and we'll be really happy to have their concrete examples. What was the contribution and engagement of universities of applied sciences, because that makes the documents much more lively and much more sort of understandable. So please, if you have these cases, share them with EURASHE, with Federica. We will keep them collecting, and it's also the way of sort of promoting your achievements. There have been several questions during the presentations regarding the measuring of the graduate success and the tracking. But I think we will leave that to the panel discussion, which will be chaired by John Edwards. And we have agreed with John that I deliberately sort of minimize my engagement in the panel because we are short of time. And I think the Portuguese example is really interesting and great for learning. So I would leave more space for Alexandra and for Alina Silva, from the senior economist from the North Regional Development and Coordination Committee. But I will pass the floor to John and leave him to facilitate the panel. Thank you all.
There you go. Thank you, Mikhail and EURASHE, for asking me to moderate this panel. So before I start, just to say who I am, I work for the Policy Experimentation and Evaluation Platform, which is a Portuguese non-for-profit association. And I also am a visiting researcher at Centre for Interdisciplinary Social Sciences, which is coordinated by Nova, University Nova Lisboa, but also has regional poles, including, I'm pleased to say, the Polytechnico of Leiria. And I think the reason why I was asked to moderate this panel is because I worked for 8 to 9 years in the Joint Research Centre on smart specialisation, when I was following Portugal geographically, and also managing projects on the role of higher education institutions and more recently vocational education and training in the design and implementation of S3. So that's why I'm here. And before I start, I would like to just say some publicity for former colleagues. On the 11th of December, there will be a conference on smart specialization, which is hosted by CCDR Alentejo. But there'll be 2 reports being presented there. One on the, let's say, the assessment of implementation of smart specialization in Portugal, that was published over the summer, and another one on the role of higher education institutions that's being published soon, I think. And, you know, we top lineup, we have Michael Landabasso, Dominic Fourier, people who have developed this concept, and as well the Minister for Territorial Cohesion, Ana Abrunosa, who's done a lot in Portugal to push smart specialisation forward, both in her current role and before as president of CCDR Centro. But of course, I'm not working for JSC anymore, so anything I say is definitely not opinion of JSC or anybody else. In fact, I'm free now to make my opinions known. Finally, just a bit of housekeeping. I already mentioned it, but if you could put your questions in the Q&A, because it's easier for me to read them than in the chat. I'll try and answer some of those, depending on the time, as well as bring in the panelists. I'm pleased we have the Polytechnic still with us, but before then, I'd like to introduce, well, Alexandra. You already know him because he's made the keynote presentation. He was in CCDR North back in the days when the S3 were being designed. Now, let's say his colleague from Porto, Alina Silva. Well, I would like to start by asking Alexandra something, which is that I think your point about wedding planners is a very good one, and asking the UAS, the Polytechnicus, to be wedding planners. I mean, I've only got married once, thank God, because it's a very expensive business. So I just would like to know if they're going to be wedding planners, who's going to pay for them? And also these intermediaries in general, who's going to pay for these intermediaries? Because at the moment, I don't see many funding for these people, which I agree with you are important for the system. Oops, sound.
Trying to activate sound. I think now we are. This gave me a little bit of time to rethink my answer because it would be a little bit harsh. So, it was nice. So first of all, thank you for your question. I would say that even picking up the experience of Luis Loures in Porto Alegre and starting with the low density regions, it's clear that we need some kind of wedding planners, people that do the matchmaking, that organize the wedding, they arrange the honeymoon, and the rest comes by itself, hopefully. Because we are trying to implement a paradigm that implies the combination of different production capacities, different research capabilities within the response of a specific challenge and the transformational needs for the economy. And so it's very hard. I'll give an example right away of how I think of it, but it's very hard to do it on a non-professional basis. So I would think that before explaining how we can pay for it, we need to really understand and be able to communicate effectively the need for it. Because as many newlyweds, people always think that they can manage alone and that they are aware of everything that is around them. The same applies to policymakers. We believe that from a spontaneous mixture of actors, something will come up eventually. And this is not so. We need a more professional approach to design and implement an efficient ecosystem of smart specialization. We need those wedding planners not only to create the roadmap of the action plans, but also to actually support the actions in itself. And this is the integration tricky part of smart specialization, because smart specialization is not just a vertical exercise of value chain. It's also taking advantage of the combination of different value chains. And so a crossing combination of opportunities. And this is this matrix approach that underlies smart specialization is nothing that is very common to our reasonable way of thinking and our common rationale in terms of policy making. We need the details. The devil is in the details. We need the details, and only a wedding planner, the integrator, can actually do an effective matchmaking and try to identify which are the details, the bottlenecks, the structural bottlenecks that Anna was mentioning before. On an everyday basis, they actually come down to very specific and small things, but which hamper cooperation and the effectiveness of projects. So we need those wedding planners. And I'll give an example in terms of the wedding planners and how this assistance needs to work. I was looking at Luis' presentation regarding Alentejo. And Alentejo is a key example of this. You have low density. You have the need to use whatever you have to come up with a response that is actually able to generate some kind of economic dynamic. And when you think of, for instance, tourism or agri-food, they need to link everything. But most of our entrepreneurs and even some of our research units are very scattered and very small. So lots of market failures here that need some kind of hand of God. It's not the invisible hand of Adam Smith, but the hand of God to actually join them together. And this is the way I see the role of the integrators. Now, if this role of integrators, of wedding planners, is understood correctly by the institutions itself, there are ways of financing that. The first is actually available on most regional operational programs, which is around the collective action support system that probably some of you used. In Portugal, we know them as SIAC, SIAC, or SAAC, depending, which are instruments created to support collective actions. And what I'm meaning about wedding planners are collective actions of intelligence, delivering intelligence in this matchmaking, and actually then designing the roadmap to action implementation. We can support that through regional programs and even national programs. This means that the management authorities need to be aware of the importance of creating these champions and funding them. My worry is that we did this with clusters and we discontinued that. So when we created clusters, we were trying to devise that collective intelligence that guides us to some extent to a new path of development. But we then discontinued, but we can pay for it. Also, this is something that the national budget should be able to pay because this is fundamental to the implementation.
Okay. Well, we would like to see some of the evidence of those funds being spent, because I certainly can't find it. Apart from, as you say, the clusters was discontinued. I mean, just some data on the funds. I know this isn't as simple, but you know, in our thematic objective 1, there are 2 investment priorities, as you know very well, Alexander, 1A and 1B. 1A is essentially knowledge generation, although there are some you know, thrills and sort of added sort of knowledge dissemination requirements in 1A, but they're not used very much. And 1B is knowledge transfer. Okay, so HEIs in Portugal so far in this period, 1A, 1,272 projects, of which 1,215 were universities and just 57 were polytechnics. 1B, 66. Okay? So 1A, 1,272, 1B, 66, of which 54 were universities and just 12 were polytechnics. So, you know, if the University of Applied Sciences are supposed to have a crucial role, and if you speak to Dominic Frey, he'll say this, in Switzerland, that said, you know, really they're the ones that make smart specialization work. Why was it only 12 projects funded for polytechnics under 1B of the structural funds in the ERDF?
Well, I think that this is a systemic problem. For starters, polytechnicals are the bastard son of science. So let's be honest. Applied sciences in Portugal are the bastard son, and universities are the prodigal son. So there is a bias in public policy regarding that. I'm starting to sound like André Ventura, and I'm starting to getting worried. But the foreign people did not understood this part, but thank God. But this is true. The applied sciences, this effort of Portugal in terms of science push, created an aura around universities, and that aura is genuine. It's worthy. However, for some reason, we started seeing polytechnical schools are the ugly duckling in this equation. So they are the less able, and this also passes through the evaluation of processes and the way we devise the instruments. This is one of the reasons. There's also a second reason. Some polytechnical schools have faced also some issues in terms of internal capabilities. So there are responsibilities from the state, but there are also responsibilities from the stakeholders. Some of the polytechnical schools and institutions have internal issues, and we're not. We are today talking with few good exceptions, but most of them were not also very inclined to participate in this type of projects, at least in a muscled way. Whereas universities were very keen on participating as soon as they realized that this would condition their access to funding, this was not so clear from the applied sciences university standpoint. So we can fund polytechnical schools. The instrument was poorly used, firstly, because of political decisions. Again, we were still facing a strong science push that is monodimensional. We are forgetting the second part of the purposeful science. And this is a reality that is of skewed political options. There's an issue related to the instrument itself, which is in some regions was not widely used, and it was not attractive for management authorities. I really don't know why. But also there's when I started my presentation, I asked, did we care? And this is very relevant. At some point in time, most of us forgot about smart specialization, and as Anna was very candid in saying, if we needed to force it, we did, but it was just an obstacle. It was not a strategic vision. It was merely a bureaucratical obstacle to go through. And that says a lot about smart specialization, why 1B, that we in Portugal call 1.2, was little used.
Okay. Well, look, I don't want to put you on the spot, Alexander, and sound like some investigative journalist who's grilling you on a Sunday morning. So apologies for that, but you are the closest we've got to the national, let's say, policymakers here in the panel. Look, I'd like to ask CCDI North about their experience, because the regions are the ones who are, let's say, central to smart specialization, in my view. I'm sure that the polytechnics have got lots to say about what we just discussed. But before I bring you in, I would like, as I said, to get the regional dimension by asking Alina, how in the north, how have you experienced smart specialization? What some of the positive and negative elements have been, especially regarding partnerships and cooperation amongst the different actors. Alina.
Hello, first of all, thank you for your invitation. I want to start saying that the smart specialization is a learning process. So we have a lot to learn about this process, and in the next period, I think we have to do a lot of things different, but we also have to say that in this period of time, we learned, and we are changing, and we are implementing the smart specialization with very interest, and not only to accomplish some goals, but we believe in this strategy. The higher education institutions, and in particular the universities of applied sciences, are very important, and we believe they can be a key. They can have a key role in the regional transformation through the contributing to smart specialization strategy. In Portugal, as it was said before, we have 7 regional strategies and a national strategy, and for this and combining these all strategies, we have a multi-level governance, and this is based on cooperation and willingness of sharing among multiple actors in the process. The regional smart specialization respects the quadruple helix model and the entrepreneurial discovery process. And in this process, we involved a lot of actors, companies, higher education institutions, research and development institutions, public planning and management entities for R&D. This was a difficult time, not all went right, and as it was said before, the articulation between the entrepreneurial discovery process at national level and the regional level sometimes were not well, and for example, the thematic goals were not possible to implement, and this was the main issue, the main problem that we see and must be very soon made different for the next period. The polytechnics for us play a very important role. We have polytechnics in all our region, but in particular, the polytechnics that are in the rural areas play a role that perhaps is even more important than other polytechnics that are in the metropolitan areas, where we have also strong universities. But in the rural areas, they are our key actors in those territories. They made the politics there very important. The coordination with other actors and stakeholders in their territories is very, very important. There are very important assets in that regions that the local actors that sometimes are fragile, need help and need to be supported to be able to present projects, to implement strategies. So we see the polytechnics and the universities of applied sciences as the key roles, as playing a key role and being very important actors for our strategy, our present strategy, and our future strategy that in the moment is being revised.
Okay, thank you, Alina. We look forward to seeing the new strategy of North to improve on that. Because I mean, you already did some good work on monitoring, I know, amongst other things. But look, we've got people who want to speak, and I will ask. Also, I want to look at the questions, and we haven't got much time, so I'll ask Luís Loures to comment first, and as well as commenting on what you would like to say, can you also address this issue of graduate tracking? Because this was raised in the chat, and I think it's very important, especially for polytechnics. Is there some way of measuring where your graduates work and if they're linked to some of these societal challenges and high innovative industries? Thank you, Luís.
Thank you, John. Thanks again for the opportunity. I just wanted to, prior to answer to the question about tracking and about the monitoring the process, which I believe that all the polytechnics do, because in fact we work with the region, and most of our, I would say, for example, our short cycles are developed together with the region, and we tried to respond directly for regional needs and try to get higher education, very specialized for the needs of our SMEs. But I would like to comment on two things that were mentioned before. Mm-hmm. One mentioned by Alexandre regarding the wedding, the wedding makers. I would say that is crucial, but somehow in regions as, for example, the Alentejo region, I would say that the polytechnics do somehow that work, because we have to cooperate directly with the industry together with SMEs in order to make things work. The hardest part of it, and when it comes for funding, and for example on the Alentejo region, it is that funding somehow it is located and directed for a perspective which is not associated with the regional reality. Let me say, for example, when you're launching calls for higher education institutions to get along with SMEs, and if you go to the Alentejo region, the number of options that we have, it's very, very, very limited, because the economic tissue and the economic ecosystem, it's very sparse. And so I have had this discussion with John in one of the meetings that we have, which is we need somehow to readapt and rearrange funding to the reality of regions. Because, for example, if we go to Leiria or to Cava de Ave, the density and the economic prosperity of the region give them other options that most likely the Alentejo region doesn't have. For example, I normally use this as an example. When we're looking for a project that you need to introduce a large company in the Alentejo region, conversely, the option will end up on the same 3 or 4 companies because there are no others, right? And this limits a lot our intervention. But I would like to focus, this being said, I would like to focus on funding for UASH, which I think that it is what Alexander mentioned, it's exactly the point. Okay. Financing, it's really biased. Yeah. It is biased because when you divide classical universities and polytechnic universities or University of Applied Sciences, you're dealing with an historical bias that somehow have put us on, I would say, a subservient position since ever. And this is not true anymore. Anna just mentioned a very good example, which is the number of projects and the number of research centers that they have approved and financed by FCT. And this means quality. Then when you go to match this with the number of financing that they have compared with, I would say, with classic universities, you will see that evaluation is still biased and that we urgently need to change that. When, for example, Alina said, and this is paradigmatic of the status quo of our society. When Alina said that, for example, in some regions of the interior, the polytechnics play a very important role, but in some metropolitan areas, there are other universities. I wouldn't say that because, for example, if we go to Coimbra, of course, University of Coimbra, it's important, but it is as important or even more important, the Polytechnic of Leiria and the Polytechnic of Coimbra. Of course, the University of Porto is important, but the Polytechnic of Porto, it's also very important. It's an institution with 20,000 students. And so it means that it has a huge impact for the region. And I think that we really need to change this and change that, I would say, stigma on the first perspective. And then we also need to change the status quo of the recognition of University of Applied Sciences. For example, we are here as universities.
So
yeah.
I don't want to interrupt you because this is some really interesting things that you're saying, and we could go on forever, but unfortunately, time's against us. So I have to interrupt you because I also would like to give a couple more minutes to Anna and Felipe to come in on this. But thank you. Let's continue the conversation later. So Anna, for example, are you able to answer some of these questions in the chat briefly? So about graduate tracking, and the skills element for the S3 priorities, changing your curricula or adapting some of it to get in line with smart specialization. Can you say something on this?
Yes, on the first, thank you. On the first comment, I understood that the question was about graduate and employability tracking.
Yes.
In fact, our employability rate it's very high. It's around 95%, but we are not still tracking whether the graduates are actually employed in their area. We are working on that. We are preparing a tool, a questionnaire to see whether they are working on their graduation area or not. And we are not funded by employability rates. Funding would lead to a very big discussion and long discussion, and we don't have the time. I know that Luis also shares some concerns that we also have, but funding is another big issue. The only thing where employability enters is in defining the vacancies for new students. So we have to comply with certain employability levels to be able to offer some vacancies in our courses. And the other issue was, sorry, John, I forgot.
Oh, it would be about, obviously, if that's going to happen afterwards, where the graduates work, then, you may have to think about your curricula, about okay. Does it feed the regional priorities? Yes.
In the short cycles, we are developing them in straight relationship with the SMEs and the region itself. In the bachelor's, it's not so much. We are now changing our curricula to introduce some flexibility and to introduce a greater percentage of optional courses that can be applied to the SMEs and that can be done in cooperation with the SMEs. In fact, we have a CIAC, collective action support system project being approved, we hope, just to do that, to adapt some of our curricula to challenges proposed by companies and other organizations. And masters are being developed, a great share of them. In the second year, the project is also applied to companies. In fact, we have a program called Polytechnic of Leiria plus Industry, according to which companies may pose their problems to be dealt by students in their masters. And that's it. We are trying to improve that. We are not at the best position, but we're working on it.
Okay, but I mean, thank you for that overview. And I think, as you can see here, there's so much to talk about. And I wish we had all day to talk about it, but we haven't. And just as a way to wrap up, I mean, I would say that there are possibilities to change things, and the change in the programming period even more so. You know, the ERDF, yes, Alessandra, was the responsibility of the Commission, but the member states can also decide on how to spend it. Between, for example, 1A and 1B, that's up to the member states, not the Commission. And now we have a new specific objective in the RDF for skills for smart specialisation, entrepreneurship, and industrial transition. This provides a fantastic opportunity for the UAS to get more involved in smart specialisation. But again, it's up to the member states to decide how much they invest in this specific objective. So we're all waiting with a bated breath for your recommendations, Alessandra, to feed through to those policymakers sitting in Lisbon. So I'd like to conclude the panel discussion now and pass over to Dimitri Kopakis from Friends of Smart Specialisation to wrap up this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, for this introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. As John said, we will not have much time. First of all, 2 words for me. I'm a retired commission official, and together with a number of friends, we have started this small reflection group on Friends of Smart Specialisation. We were lucky enough to be there when the whole adventure of smart specialisation had started. And John was also there right from the start. So to sum up, this was a first very important event. I think the discussion was extremely rich right from the start. I will not try to resume everything, but I think it was quite complete because we heard from Alexander Almeida a really good wrap-up about how the national strategy for smart specialization was introduced, a very, very difficult exercise because you have to remember that was uncharted territory at the time. We were all experimenting and nobody really knew what the outcome of this exercise would bring. And we were all driving the same uncertainties. But Portugal, it is a very good case because you have a combination between the national strategy and the regional strategies. And we have seen in the ensuing presentations how the local universities and local polytechnics here can really give very, very interesting ideas and a huge diversity to the process. Because as you know, the most difficult part of smart specialization, where everything builds on, is the entrepreneurial discovery process, is the real heart of the process. And this is where universities, and it was actually mentioned in the discussion, can build the role of the honest broker. They have no particular interest. They are not, I would say, they don't have business interests, although it's not bad to have a company. But nevertheless, universities and polytechnics can really connect with the business community and build a bridge with the local authorities to build the triple helix coalition. And here we have seen also interesting ideas. For example, I liked a lot what Luis has said about the circular economy championship. It is a great idea that can also connect with the Green Deal. I liked also what we listened from Felipe and the particular projects that the region is developing, but also what Anna has identified as particular projects. But also I liked I would say, the touch with the reality, because as we know, sometimes the regulatory components of the structural funds were not really ideal to connect with smart specialization. I refer here, for example, to a very, very hasty introduction of the conditionalities that took everybody by surprise. And we knew that it was very difficult to do it at the same time to comply with a certain amount of regulatory conditionalities and at the same time have an intelligent process. But nevertheless, what I actually also like from the discussion is what Alexander has stressed. That is what he called the implementers, the wedding planners. I would call it like what Kevin Morgan actually talks about, boundary spanners. You need at each region some individuals that would do the synthesis, the real synthesis for the stakeholder coalition, and bring together the diversity of projects and efforts to bring the planning forward and actually go forward with a very difficult implementation. And so again, the polytechnics have a strong role to play. I actually keep in mind what was one of the last remarks about raising the value and raising the added value of the polytechnics at the whole universe of the knowledge institutions, because we have heard that especially in the lagging regions, universities take the full credit sometimes, and sometimes the polytechnics get a little bit less of the credit, which is not a good thing. So we need a better integration of all institutions, of all knowledge institutions with the business and the government community. I know that we don't have much time. I would like all of you to be present, and you are all invited to our next event that will be on the 2nd of December, and it will focus on the Basque Country, another very interesting case on the roadmap of smart specialization. So I would like to give back the floor to Michal for the last word. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dimitri, and thanks to all the speakers. I think it was an amazing event, and I really appreciated the motivation and the driver. And I'm sorry that we didn't have enough time for everyone to express fully what you had in mind. And I can see that we are opening the new chapter of discussion. And indeed, as Dimitri said, there will be further series of webinars, the next one on devoted on Basque Country. But we are also trying to set up the one on Italian experience because I think one of the issues which we haven't touched is the synergy of the clusters of universities of applied sciences and universities, and using the benefits of and strength of their different profiles. And I think that's an amazing experience as well. So my great thanks. We will use that for the further development of the policy paper. We will focus on smart specialization for the next year. So please keep in touch with us. Share the cases as I was asking for. And I have to say as well that we will have the annual conference in May in Portugal, in Porto, within the Portuguese presidency to the European Council of Ministers. And we are still trying to find the way how to make it at least blended, as we don't know what the circumstances will be in May, but we can see that people are still sort of cautious of committing to travel. So there will be a number of opportunities, and we will raise some of your issues in the next series and discuss that further on. It was extremely helpful, and thank you all, and thanks also to the participants who have followed the event. There will be the presentations shared, and there will be further recordings. And if you are interested, follow us through newsletter or social media. Thank you very much, and see you in Basque Country.